if you like, Steph. All right, good morning, everyone. It's 8:30, so we'll open the meeting. Welcome to our team and Rachel, our internal auditor. Welcome along. Call for apologies. Mayor Helen is maybe late. We'll see if she gets back in time. A bit of a motion to receive that. Thank you, Councillor Short. Seconder, please. Councillor Hadfield. Put the motion. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 3, confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on 12th of May are there for the record. Somebody like to move that they're true and correct or otherwise? Councillor Hadfield and seconded Mr. Folk. In discussion? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Has any member got any item that may be a conflict of interest on the agenda? Nope. We'll move on. Thank you. There are no late items that I'm aware of. Item 6 is presentations, safety and wellbeing deep dive from the utilities team. So Brock, Wuramu, good to see you both. Now, how long would you like? Because we do have a number of items following. So
no pressure.
Yeah. I think the group is fairly well rehearsed with this little process, so I can't imagine it will take all too long.
Right.
Right. So yeah, as I say, you guys are very aware of what we do with these now. So our latest health, safety and wellbeing deep dive was with the utilities team. And yeah, we'll just crack into it. And as usual, if you've got questions as we go, that's fine. Otherwise, there's an opportunity at the end if you have any burning questions. Do I need to turn this on? Yeah, cool. So as usual, we'll just have a quick recap of those due diligence requirements. Got a quick chat about the site visit. Wuramu is going to talk a bit about the nature of the operations of the utilities team, and then we'll work our way through our key risks for the utilities team. So again, I won't go through these word for word. You guys are really aware, but the reason we do these site visits is it gives you guys a really good chance and the executive leadership team to sort of kind of look at that due diligence side of the Health and Safety at Work Act, and make sure that you guys kind of make yourselves reassured that we are doing what we need to do in the health and safety space. A few pictures there from our site visit. So this was done on Monday this week, down at the Resource Recovery Centre, and yeah, just due to sickness and a couple of other clashes, we didn't quite have as many staff as we were hoping, but it was great to have Anna and Deb along. They were really helpful to answer some of the questions and stuff as well. And JB from Smart Environmental, who took us through kind of well, what they do down there. And, you know, I think, I mean, I have a bit of an idea of the risks in that down there, but it just hit me like the number of moving vehicles and things like that. I was like, just that short time we were there was, yeah, pretty intense.
Didn't that you actually?
No, Hamish, no, that would be
Christian?
Are we able to talk about the site visit or do you want to wait to the end?
yeah, 100%.
Yes, I got there first and didn't know where to go. Did the wrong thing because of practice of signs I didn't see. There was a trade vehicle on the weighbridge, so I went around where the arrow said and swung around in the car park, and suddenly the guy from the kiosk was running over. Who are you? What are you doing here? I said, I'm here for the council site visit. For what? You know, so he wasn't aware, and then he was running it. He had to leave his post and run around and find JB to say, are there people coming this afternoon? Told me to stay right where I was. But I was actually, I mean, it's a very busy site, and we were visitors, and perhaps there should have been some pre-site visit instructions, I think. The the amount of truck movements, and I noticed that those really big trucks don't have reversing beepers. And those guys would just move out of my way. He never got out of the cab and said, excuse me, I'm just about to back in here. Would you 10 people please move over there? And I was just made me aware of how many big pieces of machinery and how many chances there are of people in that workspace being clipped by something.
One of my reflections was that we probably didn't pick the best time of day to do the visit. So it was later in the day and a lot of trucks coming back. So that was definitely.
And we didn't see the move working, but it would be quite interesting to see what it's like when there are people. Do they go up the top? I'm not quite sure how they sort everything, but yeah, just, there was just a few concerns about, I thought the health and safety could have been a bit tighter.
I did mention to Francis afterwards that there were a couple of things that I noticed. So we'll filter those back through Wiramu and back to Smart
Oh,
Environment.
it was still really, really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, totally.
but I don't know if anyone else felt that way.
You had to keep your wits about you, put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a highly operational area, so
100%.
Busting was a squash counsellor.
I think
Ratepayers might disagree.
Given it's election time, probably.
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, it clearly was an operational site where you would expect actually an awful lot of activity to be taking place. So possibly I've got a slightly different take on it to Councillor Short, but I do concur that a pre-brief would have actually been useful, because at the end of the day, we've got to understand personal responsibility as well as responsibility of the party that's operating machinery and everything else, and I think probably that's as Councillor Short said, that's probably the little bit that was missing. But I'm pleased to know that nobody raced after me, and I did exactly the same as Councillor Short, and I just drove around the weighbridge and into the thing. So
Yeah, as did I.
I won't make any assumptions, Councillor Short.
Right. Thanks, Brock.
Awesome. Also, I'll pass over to Wiramu to talk a bit about the work the utilities team does.
Thank you, Brock. Probably can I just sort of just go back to the Resource Recovery Centre just for a second. I've taken on board what in terms of the pre-briefing, and it's probably sort of listening to Councillor Short in terms of what you're wanting to see, like from a health and safety perspective versus actually seeing the operations working. It's probably two different things.
I didn't expect us to see the move working. I just wondered what the protocols were when the move was working.
And it's probably there's a gap there because it is an operational site, and we don't actually sort of have visitors on site that often. The last time we sort of did that was with the Rotary Group, and also sort of after hours. There was a lot more control. We had a pre-brief at the beginning, those type of things. So take it on board. We'll certainly learn from this because it's not going to be the only group that sort of come through. So the picture probably speaks 1,000 words in terms of what we do. Those are key projects on there. There's in terms of utilities, when I first started the role, it was pretty much the pipes in the ground was pretty much our go-to. But we tend to do a lot more out of the ground as stuff in the ground these days. So some of our key projects have been treatment plants, reservoirs. We've obviously got the solid waste contract as well, so it's quite a busy space on our side. And I'm probably more open to answering questions if you've got them, because it's sort of otherwise I could go on for ages.
Well, we'll just go straight to questions. Anything about the site or the operation there?
Yep. You specifically around health and safety, or?
I think, Chair, if I can, I think my observations of a few years around council was that, and it's just a more of a compliment comment, is that we do remarkably well when it comes to injuries and touch wood. Let's say continue. Given the amount of equipment we use, the infrastructure over a large area of the land. So it's just more of a really a compliment. Yeah, and also to taking the time to let us to go around and visit these sites to give appreciation of where they are. I certainly appreciate that effort. Thank you so much.
I'd concur with that. Wiramu, there's, as you mentioned, there's two parts to those visits. The one to have a look at the health and safety, but just the chance for us as councillors to get out and see the sites, especially a particularly busy one like that, is invaluable. And ideally, well, I think we're just inviting the Health and Safety Committee, aren't we? No, we're not. We're opening it up to all councillors. That's good. That's appropriate. I think it's of interest to all councillors, definitely.
Yeah, too right.
Yeah. Hamish?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think probably a relevant point, and I pick up on Councillor Casey's point. There is a lot happening in the space, as Wirram has outlined. There's a range of different projects. Accidents don't happen. That's not by accident. And I think back to our discussion at council yesterday around our procurement policy and the way that we engage our contractors and the level of risk involved in those projects. And there's a real trade-off between price versus the attributes that the companies bring. And so a simple put a pipe in the ground versus the bottom left-hand corner there, for example, that's not an easy job. And so our procurement process reflects the fact that we want the best contractor for the job, not just the cheapest price. And the best contractor for the job is not just the methodology of the engineering, but also their site management and how they manage the on-site safety for themselves, but also their subcontractors and suppliers as well. So a lot of work goes in behind the scenes, which, to be honest, we try and express that through the reports that come to council.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that elected members don't see in terms of that assessment and evaluation, and also our risk management and procurement management approach to make sure that those accidents don't happen. Obviously, nothing's completely in our control, but I think as you outlined, Councillor Casey, the fact that we don't bring accident reports and near miss fatalities, problems, or serious incidents, that there's a lot of structure in behind that to make sure that is the outcome that we get. So,
Thank you, Hamish. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, guys. As you're aware, I spent a little bit of my working life studying statistics around this area, and in the 3 years I've had the privilege of being around the table in the discussions that we had around health and safety right at the beginning of this triennium. I'm actually very impressed with how council's approached its responsibilities under health and safety, and I think if you have a look at industries across the board and have a look at some of the incidents and some of the statistics that come out, especially as Wiramu said, when you're working, agriculture is a decent sort of thing, the area I've worked in for high statistics, but the amount of danger and the amount of risk that guys face in this sort of environment, is quite significant. So I think all the strategies that council's put in place, I think have served council very well. So I'd also just congratulate everybody on their efforts and actually the outcomes as well, because I think, as Mr. Ward said, I think it is quite significant. And of course, everybody wants everybody to go home in the same condition that they came to work in every day. That's the guts of it. So well done.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? No, well, look, thank you both. Now, before you go, look, I want to especially thank you, Brooke. I understand this is your last attendance at our health and safety, at our audit and risk meeting. You've been a regular presenter here, and you've done an excellent job that we've seen, and I understand you've done an even better job that we don't see in your day-to-day work. So look, all the best for your new role at DIA, is that correct? In the big city. So yeah, well done. Thank you very much.
We still do have a couple of slides to run through.
Right.
But I take
finished.
that. I just have to move away. But maybe what we'll do, Robert's the health and safety rep. We are actually doing our health and safety rep nominations at the moment, so this will change as of next month. I will go through these quite quickly because these risk workshops are getting a bit old now, so this is something that will need to be redone moving into next year. But these were the 5 that the utilities team sort of saw as their 5 big risks back in September 2020. And again, driving is one that you guys would have seen, I think, probably every time we've done this in terms of the causes, what could cause something to go wrong in the controls that we have in place. What I would just talk about is the last one there, the actions underway. And so we are looking at the potential of upgrading our e-road system. So the current ones we have, if you go out of cell phone coverage, they will stop tracking you. And the new ones are basically connected to the satellite. So no matter where you are, it's going to constantly track you.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So there's obviously nowhere to hide once you do the satellite. That's right. Brock, what was the uptake of the driver training? Have we had folk go through defensive driving or advanced driver training?
Yep. So we do run at least once a year. We run advanced driver training.
Yeah, great.
It hasn't been done through the COVID period, but we will look to do it again. What we have just done 2 days this week and 2 days last week was four-wheel drive training.
Oh, neat, yeah.
So we got all the operations team and a couple of the emergency management team on through that. I think Hal did it too. Yep. And then we'll run it again and get the roading and the rest of the utilities team through it probably early next year.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
From all accounts, it was very fun playing in the mud. So it's good. Moving machinery. So I think we all got a first class look at that one on Monday. And yeah, so I mean, the team is very aware that when they're on site, it is really, making sure you're aware of what's going on around you all the time. Trench collapse. So when you saw those photos of, lots of the pipes being put on the ground and things like that. And of course, a lot of this is also to do with the contractors that we're using. So making sure that they've got the systems in place to make sure any trench is secure and things like that. Stress and burnout. So this is another popular one that comes up quite a bit. So we really try to take this seriously and try to, help people before it gets to the point of burnout. And I'll just highlight there the diversity and inclusion project. I think will have a bit of an impact on this and the way that people feel when they're at work. And I mean, the makeup of the utilities team is a very diverse makeup, which is really cool. So if we can do even more to make people feel included, then that's good. Only can lead to good things in terms of the way people feel at work. And infections. And I think this was really, COVID was only relatively new at this stage. So people were all very concerned at the time, rightly so, about becoming infected while at work. So but low risk rating, which is good to see coming out the other side of that stuff. And our strategic activity plan. So this is our safety and wellbeing strategy. We're in a really good place with this. We had 10 goals, as you guys will be aware. We've kind of completed a lot of them, and other ones that are, for example, the first one there, the risk management processes, really is just waiting for the Jarvis upgrade, and then all the risk stuff will move into Jarvis with automated workflows to remind people to check controls for risks and sign off that they are still appropriate, or the option to suggest that new things are needed, and we can follow that through. What I would say is, again, that that document was a 3-year document, which goes in line with the council triennium. So in October, the executive leadership team will kind of sign off the new strategy, and then it will come to council to be endorsed, just as it was at the start of this triennium. So a lot of the stuff will carry on. There's more work to do, but there will be a few new goals in place. For example, better processes around when we're using volunteer groups and how we manage their health and safety and things like that, which we've got some work to do on. I think you got all your questions out, if there are any more.
Yes, yeah.
Perhaps it's more towards Wiremu and Hamish. Emergency management, like if there's a extreme weather event and it's in the dark, do utilities team members go out, there's heaps of phone calls coming in saying, there's houses at risk, or like recently there's breaches likely to happen in other parts of the district, which probably is more horizons in that case. But do the staff go out as it's happening, or do we more use the contractors for that and you go and have a look the next day? How does it work?
So I'll probably kick off on that one. If you look at an emergency event, I guess it depends on the nature of it, but typically it's going to be adverse weather and flooding. So in terms of council staff that are involved, it tends to be our reticulation team and our operations team. So the project engineers and sort of Wiramu's office-based team aren't the ones that are going out at 3 o'clock in the morning. It typically is the retic guys and girls. In addition to that, we have our contract with Higgins. So they have a small group of staff that are effectively on call throughout the day and night. So any emergency situation would be, in terms of weather, would be attended to by council operations staff and primarily Higgins roading staff. Now, attending to doesn't mean doing everything and putting themselves into a high risk situation. Typically, it means either closing roads or clearing drains or making sites safe. And if there is works to do in terms of clearing slips or failures in the stormwater network, for example, it's really making it safe at the time, and then we come back basically in the hours of daylight to be assessing what needs to be done and then doing any physical works from there.
Right.
So we don't get in boots and all and try and do everything all at once in the middle of the night in a high risk situation. It's really about protecting people primarily and then property secondary. And once the people are safe and we can do all we can for the property, we'll come back when the sun comes out effectively, or the next day when there's daylight to do the higher risk activities.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Marsh, you've got a question?
Yeah, good morning all, and thanks very much. Been good just listening to that deep dive, and I also just want to reiterate 2 or 3 of the comments that have been made. First of all, through the chair, Brooke, thank you very much for everything that you've done over this last triennium with the role that you've had and the communication that you've had back, both with myself, the safety and wellbeing team, and through audit and risk. And I congratulate you on your move forward in your new role. And thank you again very much for everything. The 2 or 3 comments that I'd like to make, and really re-endorsing Councillor Hadfield's and Councillor Short's comments around the deep dive, etc., and the site visit. And that's exactly, in my view, and I know I wasn't there, unfortunately, but that's exactly why we do these deep dives, because it actually brings awareness, not necessarily to our contractors or to the people that are working on the sites the whole time. It's those people that come onto the site that aren't aware of a lot of those things. And I think that worked perfectly, and it was exactly the right time of the day to have that visit down there so that we could actually see that. And my mind goes back to the start of the triennium, when we were just starting to initiate some of these health and safety scenarios, and the elected staff, new councillors around the table, etc., were given instructions that we were going to visit 2 or 3 sites, and that hard shoes or boots should be worn, and 2 of our elected members turned up with open-toed sandals. So again, I just reiterating Grant Hadfield's comments around the fact that we are now all aware of the health and safety and the well-being of all staff. And I think that's been an amazing feat over the last 3 years. So well done.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Brooke, if you move to the E-roads, what will happen to the Get Home Safe program? Because that's the app, but that's what elected members use, because we're not, in our private vehicles. So will that run side by side?
So we wouldn't remove Get Home Safe just because we do this with E-roads, because we know E-roads is only fitted to certain vehicles, and we do have staff as well who, if they attend a night meeting, they might take their own vehicle and things like that. So yeah, Get Home Safe has had varied success. And so I think it'll be worth us. I want to get the E-road stuff sorted. We need to get the E-road stuff sorted, and then from there look at, is Get Home Safe still the best thing to have alongside that, or is there another option to put alongside it? But yeah, it will still be there to be used at the moment. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Yeah. No other questions or comments? No, well, look, thank you again, both of you, for your presentation. Yeah, good work and best wishes.
Thank you.
I think should, yeah.
I think I'm on next to actually. So
Oh,
Can't get rid of
God,
me
we
this
really.
That'll be your second turn, you know.
Thanks for the moment.
We're really premature in our send off. All right. Okay, Brooke, you can lead us into our self wellbeing quarterly report.
Cool. So this is, the same sort of dashboard that we get each quarter. I will just take it as read, and if anybody's got any questions, happy to answer them, but otherwise.
So obviously no significant events in the quarter. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, just one. I was a little bit intrigued by 7 behaviour incidents.
Yep.
And just wondering, what would encompass that?
So these, the vast majority are at the pool and library, and it's usually youth with language or somebody's had another kid in the pool and things like that, which all gets reported. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I had asked Francis exactly the same question yesterday as I was doing a bit of pre-meeting reading, etc. Francis, can you just give us an update on what will happen with that and how you're just going to break that down in the report?
As we spoke about yesterday, Bill, we're really happy to provide further information about the breakdown of any of the incidents if councillors would like more information. I think the quarterly report as it seems to be hitting the mark, but please let us know if there's more detailed information you want.
Good. Cool. Okay. Any other questions or comments? No, well, if not, there's a resolution there on page 13.
Happy to move that, Mr. Chair, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Casey.
The Audit and Risk Committee received the Safety and Wellbeing Report for the quarter 4 of 2021-22 year.
Thank you. I have a second, please. Oh, Councillor Marsh seconding. Thank you. I'll put the motion there. Put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, I think this is the time.
Right. Thank you, Brooke. Members, I'm just wondering if we shuffle the order of the agenda to allow our internal auditor to Rachel Dean to present now. Are you happy with that, Amanda?
Yeah, that would be my
With
preference.
regards to your
Yeah,
staff?
then she doesn't have to kind of hang around.
Righto. So we'll, Rachel, if we could.
I'm trying to talk to Rachel.
If we could go to,
Yeah, we've got to get forward so you can head off easier.
we thought we'd promote you up the order. So your item is item number
7.4.
7.4. Yeah, internal FBT audit review.
No,
Should we-
7.6.
7.6.
Sorry, it's
7.6, right, sensitive expenditure, internal audit report
he's looking forward to my
on page 236. So Rachel, perhaps we'll just pass to you, or Amanda, did you want to lead anything off?
So this is one of our audits that came through in our internal audit work program. And Rachel works for Cotton Kelly Smith, which is our internal auditor that we have contracted to do these types of audits. Other audits we've had on the agenda are specifically GST and FBT, so we're using external specialists in that area, but predominantly we're using this Rachel for most of our other audits. Yeah.
Well, this was quite a classic audit, really. We actually reviewed the sensitive expenditure policy first as a separate exercise. And as with most things, with these types of audits, there's policies in place. They usually are not 100% followed because they tend to be quite heavy on the compliance side, and that's one of the recommendations I've said in here, that when people go out, because sensitive expenditure, as we all know, is extremely sensitive, and the media just love to get hold of it. And for example, you wouldn't want to be in central government and have it discovered that you'd had breakfast with a Tinder date or something like that, or anything like that, would you? So in this particular case, we went back and looked at the transactions over a period of about 7 months, and the findings are relatively common in the sense that you tend to find that over a period of time in particular, people start coding to general expenses because you're in a rush and it's a nice easy one to put it to. And then the next person, when they're going, well, they've got this transaction, where did it go last time? We have a look and it goes to general expenses. And I suspect that was probably a pattern of what was happening here. So absolute classic audit, go back and look at what's been happening. We find out there's been a bit of slippage in a few areas, and the senior leadership team have already taken steps to address all those matters. So that's pretty much, like I said, a classic audit, findings, improvements being made. I don't think there's any issues that arose out of it.
No, so
that anyone should need to be concerned about.
We've put in some extra training for staff around purchase order specifically. So as they cycle through the purchase order training, the importance of coding items correctly. So easy to say general, if it's travel and accommodation, it needs to go to travel and accommodation, which helps us with the process checking. And there's also now training around, as part of purchase order training, what sensitive expenditure is, because our system isn't smart. It's able to say, this person can spend $5,000, but it isn't smart enough to say, but not on these tiny items. It's not that clever. So that's now training for our accounts payable lady as she sees those transactions coming through. She's kind of manually checking them. It's also items now checked via the sign-off process when we're doing our payment processing. One of the auditors also does another double check on creditors. It's one of the things they look for. And also when we're doing our purchase order training, the staff are getting that training on what's actually sensitive. So I think we're covering it, pretty small money. We're not doing big amounts of stuff, but it is pretty small money.
Yeah, we usually on the risk register, sensitive expenditure comes in under the reputational damage more than the financial damage.
Yeah,
correct.
And the other problem or the challenge with sensitive expenditure is that it's a moving target. So periodically the audit office issue a new set of recommendations, and even in the process of actually doing this audit, there was some new information came out. So it's quite a hard one to keep on top of, especially if the media or someone takes a particular interest. But now I think it's tracking nicely under control here.
Councillor Casey.
Thank you. Just a comment, Mr. Chair. I think the moment you go purchasing order, invoicing and things like that, I always get very nervous because these are the touch points for fraudulent activities, especially around small purchases, allow them to accumulate. So it's just really a comment. Thank you for tidying up. More professional development, closer eyes on, and it's just really sort of getting those clear boundaries.
All right. Yeah, John.
Just an observation and a question. I think the importance of a really good experienced accounts clerk looking at things is really invaluable, as I'm sure everybody knows. My experience is that they can catch an awful lot of things. But just a question, and I may have missed something. Do you have a set travel and accommodation supplier that you work through, travel agent or?
We don't. So we are looking, one of the things that we are looking at is whether the all of government agreement is worth doing. In my experience at other councils, it's a bit blah, actually. Very limited on the suppliers. And Wellington is the prime example. There are two suppliers, West Plaza and their affiliate, which is all lovely, but in summer you cannot sleep in that motel. It has no aircon, it's really hot. The trucks come through at 3 o'clock and bang and crash. So it's pretty rubbish. And a lot of the times when you're staying, we're looking for, can you park your car and is it close to where you're going? So there are pros and cons. What this has, I think one of the recommendations in here is around setting some guidelines. It's actually part of the OIG. Setting some guidelines about how much is acceptable spend before it gets escalated. And so we're doing some work in the sensitive expenditure to kind of take a value, because accommodation is going up and up, and actually pick some guidelines. But we do have an internal request process, which is a workflow within our document management system. We call it Jarvis, and it's called training and accommodate. It's for training and accommodation. So the person logs on the request, it goes through to their manager. I think it actually goes to GM, it might be the manager, to actually approve and say, yes, you can go on that training. And in there, you're saying where and how much. So we do have that process as well.
Your question around the use of a travel agent
Yes.
for bookings. Yeah.
So using a travel agent, we would then be paying someone a admin fee on top of our accommodation. So that wouldn't be the.
So
probably best
you
use.
tend to book direct.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
bearing in mind, we don't really fly. We mostly our accommodation is actually booking a motel using our fleet cars. Very, very seldom we're actually flying.
Okay.
And I just have to say that speaking from personal experience, I 100% support that comment that you get put in some appalling hotels at 3 o'clock in the morning, you have no sleep, you've got a meeting at 7, and the air conditioning's heat pump air conditioning is right below your window and all the rest of it. And then they say they won't guarantee you a car park, but it's first in, best dressed. So that obviously doesn't work. So you spend 5 hours trying to find a car park. I'm 100% with you on that one.
Yeah. Councillor Hadfield, then Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And yeah, again, strangely enough, I've had a bit of experience in this area as well. And I think sensitive expenditure, I guess clearly is anything that's open to public scrutiny on a corporate card. That's pretty much how it works. And I guess Mr. Fake's comments around, or yours, Amanda, perhaps around coding, actually is quite important to actually get all that stuff right and apportion things in the right area. But I think there was nothing really that in this report that actually gave me any cause for concern. But one of the important things is to have clear policies and for everybody to understand what those policies are. And I always worked on the principle in my former role is that nobody should be expected to live in any sort of condition or stay in any sort of condition that was any different than they experienced at home. And so your comments around, some of the quality of motels and everything, is actually quite valid, because there's some things that are reasonable and there's some things that are clearly unreasonable. So look, thanks for the report. And I think, coding and, some of these transactions that had insufficient evidence is to form an opinion on. I would imagine that coding would possibly would rectify that, I imagine. So pretty comfortable for me.
Alison, you on same topic?
Just a light-hearted comment. I had to stay at the West Plaza in Wellington for an RMA course, and it was 2 weeks after the Kaikoura earthquake. So I was a little bit nervous going to Wellington anyway. And I ran ahead to see if there was any parking, knowing that half the streets in Wellington were closed and things. And they said first in, first served, and there was only one car park, and it was really tight and stupid. And they took a big 4-wheel drive. I had to climb out the boot. I couldn't even get inside. And then when I was in the course, I sat next to a friend who'd come down from Palmerston North from Opus, and I said, "Are you staying here as well?" And she said, "No, we're not allowed to stay at the West Plaza. It's an earthquake-prone building. I'm up in the hut."
Right, John.
Sorry, just one final. Yeah, I've had to climb out the back of a few Land Cruisers in Wellington. So just on that travel thing as well, because one of the roles that I've been pretty staunch on is not letting people fly into Wellington at midnight and then drive north to Palmerston North, for instance, because I have had an incident in one other company where somebody went off the road going over the Rurutuckers. But I think so very much common sense is really essential. And there's no point in staying somewhere where you can't sleep and then trying to work the next day. So it's good to see that you're applying that.
Very good. Any other comments? No, just for me, yes, I'd reiterate that it appears most of your issues that you've discovered are to do with coding rather than inappropriate expenditure. So, yeah, there was nothing that I saw there that was a particular concern either. So thank you for your report and your work. And yeah, especially over the last, this is the last meeting of our triennium. So the new council will kick into gear with a new audit program. Have we got any other work on the go? I think we've got an update later on, have we?
Sorry, somebody.
Any other internal audits planned?
There is. Kathy will be updating you.
Yeah, we'll get to that shortly. Okay, thank you, Rachel.
And just on the earthquake, I was actually in Wellington in the James Cook Hotel on about the 13th floor when the earthquake struck. Oh, it was very interesting indeed, getting built around the room and everything getting smashed up. There's people text me from the overseas, etc., Saudi Arabia and the United States.
Part of the check-in process was, so if we do have another earthquake, do not leave your room, because if I think it's the West part, the Wellington City Council buildings across the street, and it was already red stickered. That if I was to go outside, it could tumble down on top of me. It was stay in your room, get under the door, or get under the table or whatever. Luckily, there wasn't a little rattle.
All right, thank you. Right, all good. So we'll go back to the agenda as presented. So next item would Councillor Head. Oh, sorry.
To move that recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Headfield, if you could do that.
Yep, I'm happy to move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive a copy of Kelly Smith limited review on the Manawatu District Council dated May 2022.
Thank you. Seconded?
Yep.
John. Any further discussion? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, item 7.2, our quarterly performance report to 30 June 2022.
Just get comfy since I'm like pretty much the rest of the time. Some comfy. Okay, so on your agenda today, you've got both the quarterly report and the annual report, and you're probably thinking, why on earth do we have both? They report on different budgets. That's the key reason. Okay, so your quarterly report takes your annual report, your annual plan budget, and then any of the things that you've agreed subsequently, the key things being your carry forwards. So therefore your revised budget for your quarterly report is much bigger than your annual plan. So when you're when we've been reporting during the year, we've shown you both, but we've really been reporting against the higher budget. When we go to report externally around the annual report, that is our contract with the ratepayer, and that's based on the annual plan or LTP. So quite different numbers, particularly around CapEx. So the quarterly report, we've done a summary at the front. So the key things. I'm just going to flip to that page. Okay, so we've ended with a surplus against budget. There's a couple of key reasons why that is. Some of the things I think that are quite positive during the year is that our development contributions came in quicker than we expected. And that's probably the first year that that's happened. But I say that, but we reduced the budget and our expectations of when it came in, because we were seeing them come in much slower. So now they've come in slightly quicker. It's not really a great, it's just a result. There's nothing we can control about that. But it does make our bottom line look better. We've also received quite a lot of external funding, as you're aware, Ohakia being the biggest one. The operating expenditure, we've got a couple of largish movements around there. As you know, we've had vacancies through the organisation at various times. So the personnel costs actually landed not too bad. The depreciation is our main one. And you can see we've got some ups and downs in there. The centralisation, the wastewater centralisation has meant that we've had to look at the assets we existingly had, it sounds terrible, we have for the centralisation that are being decentralised or unused, that word, decommissioned.
Thank you, Amanda.
Good words, thanks. Yeah. And we've had to shorten their life because we recognise that once we've got this new pipeline going past them, those actually don't have any life left. So because of that, the depreciation during the year has gone up. On the other offsetting side, in our roading area, the revaluations wasn't as high as we expected. So we landed favourable to budget by 500,000 in depreciation. It's pretty good actually for the size of that budget. Pretty excited. Well, I don't say excited. I'm excited. I'm taking that. Okay. Capital spend. I'm going to take that you've read most of these, and we'll take questions from it. But the capital spend to date, 35.4 mil. Is what was physically spent. But if you take into account the commitments, so those contracts that predominantly Hamish has committed and they're going to take a period of time to spend, we're committed at 45. So you could say we've pre-spent. Against a budget for an annual plan of 40, you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. But against the revised budget of 64, not so cool. So when we report on the annual plan, we're pretty close to budget. We report on this, we're behind budget. So that's your two main ones. The debt levels, I think probably Councillor Stewart most likely honed in on this. We're slightly ahead on our debt position. Predominantly because we haven't had the land sales from South Street that we expected at this time. So we've had some of them come in, but not all of them, and they'll trickle in the next year. So we're a little bit over. We're at 88 versus our budget of 87. That didn't breach our debt resolution because the resolution was to draw down the money we had needed. It's just that we didn't pay back as much as we expected at this time.
So some of that was sitting as cash in the bank from the earlier drawdown. Is that still there?
Yeah, no, the cash in the bank, that's been done. So last year or the year before, when we had really good interest rates, we pre-drew some debt. And so we've used that. But we have actually pre-drawn this year, probably around 3 mil too much. So the rates were looking good about, I think it was about May, and we looked at our capital spend forecast and this is where we're going to be at year end. So we've drawn about 3 mil too early. And that's some of the funding that we're due for carry forwards going forward. So we are probably 3 mil of our cash and bank is actually stuff we've pre-drawn a couple of months early.
Because I'm looking at the cash balance compared to
Budget, yep.
No, it was the same time year before.
Yep.
The 13.7 million against 11.6. So we're a couple of million up on.
Yes, we are. Yeah. So we are ahead in cash. I actually wrote some notes on here because I knew you were going to ask that. Where did I write it? So you've got a couple of things that are happening in there. We've got a combination of, where did I write it? Here we go. Yeah, I got it. Okay. So our cash balance is a little bit higher than we were expecting. A little bit, when I say quite a lot, it's around 11 mil more than we were budgeting. The opening position from the year before was higher than we were expecting because we have some operational carry forwards as well. We had some DIA funding that hasn't quite been spent. It's kind of spent in June. So we've got that little bit of cash sitting there. We drew 3 mil early, and you've also got some of the funding for projects that we haven't actually done yet. So you've got your renewal spends. So our cash balance across the life of our 10-year plan is going up quite significantly because we're replenishing our reserves for the depreciation reserve and our other reserves that we have. And we can now see that starting to happen. During the next LTP process, we may need to revisit our thoughts around borrowing for debt and having the cash in the bank to cover our reserves. So, but at the moment, our thing is to borrow for the new and then the cash reserves build up. I'd hate to say this. Did everyone notice the nursery?
Yep.
Where is Councillor Corey? It's looking great. I hate to say it. Yeah.
A question on that, yes.
With that, and a well done on turning it around, by the way.
And co, yep.
More the co, actually, just quietly. Can we please have that as an item in council? I think we've got a councillor who's been very vocal about that and is not here. He needs to know.
He knows.
Big time. Yeah.
Well, this report,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, this report will go to council
will.
next
I
week, so
realise
you can raise it then if you like.
Highlighting it when it does come through for council for adoption in the minutes.
Yeah, well done.
So if the chair doesn't highlight it, I will make sure I highlight it.
I was going to say, probably should come through the chair.
Yeah, but if he forgets, I'll be like, don't forget.
Could I indulge on that for just a second? It's been raised. And you're right, Councillor Casey, the and co. I've got a team of fantastic young women down there. Paige May is the nursery manager there. She is worth my weight in gold, to be honest. And she has been managing a really good team, working closely with some of the more social aspects of our community in terms of the Jobs for Nature program that Ngāti Kōwhara have been involved in, and also working through with some of the MSD funded work placements. So she's had to juggle a number of challenges as part of that, as well as running a productive nursery and make a dollar. So the ANCO, it really is the Page and the team down there have done a great job.
Yeah, just quick, just a follow-up question on that one. The Jobs for Nature, have you been supplying any plants to them at this point, or is there plans to?
Yes, plans to. They've got there's a 2-year program which is due to come to an end at the end of June next year.
Yeah. And
so they identified a number of projects that they were looking to do, and some of that is clearance and development, some of it's planting, and the the nursery will supply the planting for that.
Okay, thanks. Alison.
Mine was along the same line. So with Jobs for Nature's a DOC program, so
It's a DOC funded program.
funded.
so do we benefit, like, they're on site and they're doing potting up and all that kind of stuff? Is there any benefits to us, or are they using our facilities for the benefit of the program?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. It's a collaboration, if you like.
Yeah.
So the intent is that you've got a group of people that are coming through effectively a social investment through DOC. And so there is benefit to us in having some labour, if you like. I think the main benefit is to those individuals as they work in a productive nursery and they learn how to do everything from the seed collection to the germination, the potting, the on-potting, as well as the planting out and all the wraparound that goes with that. So it's very much a collaboration with them for their growth and
I
development.
guess where I was going with that is when that program finishes and the funding finishes, you don't want us to be too reliant on that. That might be why we're looking good, because we've got a lot of
No.
subsidised labour in.
No, I'd say it's come with its challenges as well. We've actually got 2 individuals from that program that we're looking to take on as NDC staff in the next financial year. Amanda will need to make sure that's in the budget, which I'll get through. But yeah, it's been an interesting program.
Okay, thank you.
A couple more questions. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just while Hamish is in the seat too, there, just in regards to the nursery, yes, that needs to be shouted from the highest hill in support of Shane Casey's comments as well, and get that in the press. And perhaps some of the work going forward, which they've got planned, be a bloody good advertisement anyway. And just as a side note, I had about a 3/4 hour meeting with John Turkington the other day, who's changing his business model quite substantially, as the forestry is not the major part of his business anymore. And he may well come and get in touch with you, Hamish, in regard to that and the nursery.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Yes. If I could just make an observation, please. In terms of the nursery and from a purely business perspective, it's a classic case, I think, there of an operation starting up, developing, going through its sort of teenage stage, and now moving into a business model that actually suits it. And one of the things that you have here as a council, of course, is you're not strictly on a fiscal basis. You're also looking at the social benefits in there. And I think social enterprise planning and reporting is something that from a couple of other organisations we're really working on. It's hard to put these things into hard figures, but you can see in here that result is gradually wound up and up and up. And you've just got to take both into account and take the point too that for obviously coming out of a business sort of model, you don't need to quite have so much focus on making sure the press are getting the point. Because I think, again, here, the social aspects of this operation really do seem to be bearing a lot of fruit. So it took time, but these things do.
And if just one further comment there, and I think that the Jobs for Nature program is an example. Sorry. Yes, it's coming to an end at the end of June next year, but I think getting some runs on the board and demonstrating some of those social outcomes puts us in a really good place for any future government or MSD programs that might lean on the same thing. So we'll approach them with an open mind, and we'll see what comes along. So,
thank you, Chair. There's just Mr. Falcon and Hamish far more articulate that better than I can. I just support those comments.
Yeah,
the social good.
I just think I should add, I think the business model for the nursery was always there. It just required some decent oversight, and I congratulate the 2 managers that are, Hamish and Amanda, for your oversight of it too, to get it going to where it should be. So well done.
Thanks, mate.
Yes.
God, Hamish. You can outside. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to point out. It's been quite a hard year for the Makino, and I think the results in that area, although they landed unfavourable, are pretty good. You know, we've had the restricted levels, we've had staffing issues, and we've had a massive issue with gas. leakage. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? With a gas issue. So we were getting some really large gas bills. So they're doing some work in that space. The fact that it landed within 200K of budget when it's quite a big budget is actually quite a good story. So I just thought that was something I wanted to point out. Another thing is that the property area is landing very favourable by 700,000. The comment in there is not quite accurate. It says it's predominantly due to the disposal of Bowen Street, which it is, and South Street, which was not budgeted for. And what they are budgeted to be disposed of, but we didn't budget to make a gain on them. Actually didn't even think about that. We just budgeted to get the cash in. We didn't think about the accounting equation. You actually end up making a gain on sale. So they were budgeted, but we just didn't budget to make a gain. So that's that one. The other thing I wanted to flick through, let me think, there was one other. In the water supply, the revenue showing is a deficit of 1.1 mil, and you know that's a pretty big number. That's actually recognising the fact that in Naharaka we have to spend the money before we can claim the money, and the contract's quite specific on when we can claim it, and therefore we actually couldn't accrue that revenue till we met that target date, target point. So although it's at a loss, that money will come in this year. So it's kind of a nothing to see there, but it is a big number if anyone ever mentioned it. I also thought you might be interested in the governance space. You'll remember during the LTP process, we consulted with the community around earthquake prone buildings and giving and allocating around $75,000 for grant funding. So if they come along and they do a consent building or something, resource, I think, they actually get it over the line, it gets signed off. We give them, I think it's $2,500 back. To date, as at the end of 30th of June, no one had taken that up, but we had about 10 in the process of happening. So we had recognised that. And just last month, I think it was, we actually paid out our first one, which is kind of exciting. But it just shows the slow uptake is that the fund is there, but until they've done the work, got the consent and everything over the line, it's not paid out. But it is happening. And then there's a page called support services, and I'd really like you to kind of remove that. It shouldn't have come. It's actually something we were just designing and mocking up, and it shouldn't actually have been in there because it's not actually a report. We're just kind of looking at a new format thinking, would this give better information? So that report's actually junk, that page. So sorry about that. That should have been picked up when we were doing the review. Your back page is your headed up as community facilities, is your CapEx. Normally you ask lots of questions around CapEx, but you know, just it's CapEx, which is more for Hamish and Lynn, maybe. But yeah, CapEx is our next part, if there's any questions on that. Otherwise, I'll just take it as read.
Councillor Short.
I did have one more question. Sorry, it's been a bit of a week for those of us that have been out in the 4 nights in a row, public halls around. I haven't had the time to put into this that I should have. I just wondered, how are we tracking with the wastewater centralisation, especially in the current construction climate? How are we tracking to budget?
Yep. So through you, Mr. Chair. Short answer is well. If you recall, over the last couple of years, some of the discussions we've been working closely with the New Zealand Defence Force around the connection of the Ohakea base to our wastewater network. They have quite a particular bureaucratic process in terms of approving funding and the like. So working on the basis of a signed MOU and in good faith, we worked to install a line from Sanson through to Fielding, which would meet not just our needs, but also theirs, essentially on the promise of the funding coming and with a signed MOU to back that up. So essentially, we spent a lot of our money, if you like, to put in their infrastructure as a sort of an interim basis. We've continued with rolling that infrastructure out. So as you'd be aware, we've approved the main pump station, which is currently under construction in Sanson. There's 2 smaller ones on the main line through to Mount Stewart, which are in the final sort of design tweak stages, which has been done on a direct engagement with the contractor basis. We approved the purchase of the pipe pre-Christmas last year to get in ahead of some signal price rises. So we forward purchased about 2 years worth of pipe. And we also engaged a contractor directly on a negotiated basis to install that pipe for us, which is largely the Rongatia through to Fielding leg, which is currently underway if you go for drive out Green Road and down through towards Rongatia. So if you looked at the program as laid out in the 2018-28 LTP, you would say we're probably slightly off that plan. But as it's evolved and developed, and particularly worked with NZDF, we're very much on target for our revised program of works.
What's their contribution going to be when we get it?
Yep, so that's been part of the ongoing discussions with them. Their capital contribution is about $6.3 million, of which literally last week signed the final paperwork for that, which we've been working through for about coming up 2 years.
We haven't seen anything yet.
As part of signing that document, there's a payment of $3.2 million that Amanda's quite excited about because she thinks she's going to get it, but I've got other plans for it. And that it also contains a milestone agreement payment for the remaining $3 million, which is as we complete the pump station works as part of that. So that's very much in hand in terms of the funding envelope that council had, plus the additional money from the New Zealand Defence Force. We've pushed ahead, as I said, with the pipe purchase, getting the pipes in the ground through from Rongatia. The next stage for us is linking up the pipe work through to Halcombe, and then from there, there's a number of pump stations to go in. But the backbone of the infrastructure from from Sanson to Fielding is in. And then there's a separate piece of work that NZDF need to organise themselves, or potentially with us fully funded by them, is the connection from the Ohakia base to the New Sanson pump station. So that's not in yet, but that will be done either by us on behalf and funded by NZDF, or by them with our permissions, effectively connecting into our infrastructure. So we've still got work to do, and we've spent a fair bit of money on this, but confident that it will achieve the outcome that we wanted, broadly within the funding that we'd initially sort of worked, taking into account some of these changes that have been made, and also reflecting the cost escalations that we have all seen across the market since we adopted the 2018-28 LTP.
So apart from the fact that we've carried the cost until we're reimbursed by the Defence Force, we're no worse off at all, aren't we?
Excellent, short answer.
You're welcome.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, it's just an observation. Obviously, you've got work going ahead of the money coming from NZDF, but you've got an MOU covering that. That ought to be fine unless they back out.
Yep.
But I'm just wondering, you've done some pre-work, you purchased pipe in advance. We all know what's happening with all these costs going up. Do NZDF have any ability, if you hadn't done that and you did a cost escalation, for them to pay for the cost escalation?
That's been part of the ongoing conversations, is around actually landing what that capital contribution would be. And if I go back to 2 years ago, the conversation was around about the $5 million mark. But as we've developed and as prices have changed, and we've been open and transparent with them around our actual pricing. And so the final figure of the 6.3 million reflects the actual cost, including escalations that we've had across the different suppliers.
So you're not caught by their bureaucratic processes?
No, we've been very clear that we're not subsidising their processes. So picking up that plus Councillor Schultz's point, we're not subsidising and we're not out of pocket.
Yeah, that's good.
Councillor Casey?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hamish, just very quickly, please, just a comment round on page 33. It's that last little section of the cycle. And I want to make no apologies for bringing it up, because we see people using it, but it's a reputational thing now. Is that, well, when is the council going to finish the section? When are we going to get it done? So it's just really that continued pressure. I know Kiwi Rail's got a factor in that.
This is the Fielding 2 pumps.
Sorry, yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of people just want to get cracking. And
yes, I through you, Mr. Chair, I certainly agree. Getting cracking is something we've been trying to do for some time now, as you know. It is literally sitting with the bureaucracy of Kiwi Rail. There's no other impediments to it. The budget is there. NZTA are on board. The funding from them is there. we did actually start building it before they
Yeah.
saw it and asked us to stop. Could have carried on, I guess, but we chose to work with their process. But it is literally sitting with the Kiwi Rail bureaucracy, and we keep pushing at different angles, but it's not something directly in our control.
Do you think we might need to fence it?
Well, to be honest, part of their, I mean, it seems farcical, but part of their issue is drainage. And so
Yeah.
they go, this is people in Auckland and Wellington who haven't probably been to site.
No.
And they look at the Canberra on the footpath,
Yes.
and we have it pointing towards the railway line.
Yeah.
Because that's where the drain is between the footpath
That's
and
right.
the railway line. They have concerns that looking at a map, the drainage should be towards the road, not towards the railway line, just in case it undermines it. And so you're literally going through this long-winded process of basic understanding of some of this stuff. They've since come back with soil testing for contaminants and the like. Why, I have no idea. But it almost feels like they're looking for excuses to delay it, but there's no reason to do that other than their own bureaucracy.
Can I just ask a question on that? The piece at the FGO end we've done,
Yes.
the road, the distance between the property boundaries and the railway line seems to be a lot more. It seems to narrow the Nancy line end. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's part of the legal, the line on the map. That's just literally an electronic line. The section that we've done is council-owned road reserve.
Yeah.
Because of that corridor alignment, because we're going on to effectively Kiwi Rail land.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yes.
It is frustrating. I get that, and we're as frustrated as elected members are as well.
Councillor Ford has got a comment.
Is it time for political pressure on, because it's very, very frustrating. It just seems.
Any help,
Pathetic response from NZ Rail.
any help we could get from any party would be greatly received. So, yeah.
We can assist. I think.
That's what my question was.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Very good. Sorry, Enda.
I'm pretty much done. So this is the quarterly report. If you've got any other questions, Hamish will answer them. And I was going to move on to the annual report.
Okay. Any other questions on any part of the report? We've covered it off in general. Councillor Marsh, you're okay? No? Okay. Well, look, there's a resolution then on page
It's on page 16, I think.
something. If somebody would like to move that.
Mr. Chair, happy to do that. That the Audit Risk Committee recommend, that the council receive the quarterly performance report and treasury report to the 30th of June 2022. Thank Amanda for her work on that.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Can I have a second, please? John, put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Next item is the annual report.
Right, so annual report. This is, and as you're probably very aware, it looks ugly. This is what we call a plain text
Draft.
document, okay? It's in draft. Couple of big things that are outstanding. As part of year end, we do a fair value assessment. So in essence, we look at our assets and we say, are they in the accounts at a value that looks right? It's a bit more complex than that, but anyway. When it came to land and buildings, it's 3 years since we actually had them externally valued. They're due to be done this year. So rather than argue with Audit New Zealand, we just went to Credible Value and said, hey, look, can you do a fair value assessment? Cost like $2,000, come back, tell us what it is. We've got definite answers. It came back ugly, between 5 and 35% increase, which triggers a materiality. So we went back to them and went, how fast can you slam out a reval? Because there's no way Audit will let us keep our land and buildings in our accounts at the value now when the market's doing this. They've been amazing and they have just come back in the last day or two and have completed that reval. So we're going through the work around that. So we will take that information and backdate it and bring it into our accounts. So what that will do is increase the value of our assets. It won't impact depreciation because I've done it 30th of June. So it's not going to impact that this year, but it will impact going forward. So that's the land and buildings, and Credible Value have been amazing for that. So that's great. Then there's the infrastructure one. Now we reval infrastructure assets, so all the waters and roading every year. Every third year that's externally peer reviewed. So, and Audit have been comfortable with that. We always bring in the revaluations as at the 1st of July. So these financial statements have the reval information as at 1st of July last year, 1st of July, not one just been. Audit normally come in and they audit that work and they get comfortable with that. They came in for the interim audit, which to be fair was July, and it should have been about February, March to do that work. And realistically, from the 1st of July to the 30th of June, there's been some significant demand and pricing changes. And they started to do the audit. We realised that some of our key staff that were involved in that initial audit no longer are here. And it's going to be very difficult for them to do the audit. And at the end of the day, we're probably going to be having creative discussions with them as to whether our numbers are right. So what we decided to do with consultation of them is that the audit, the revaluation that's to occur this financial year is at 1st of July is already underway, and it's going to be peer reviewed and it's in the process of that. We're going to take that information and backdate into 30th of June. That means when audit come along, they do a very light sprinkle because they're just checking that we've used the right auditor for that kind of stuff, and they pretty much accept it and it's all good. So we've gone for the path of least resistance in that essence. What that means is the accounts that you have in front of you don't have that last reval, and they will again be backdated. The reason why you have them right now is audits start in 2 weeks, and I do not want to hold them up. So what they've agreed is that they'll audit this stuff, these accounts, and they'll audit the 2 revals, and then we'll bring them together and we'll have a final document. So it's kind of a bit sectional. So this document here is in draft. There have been actually a couple of changes. We're still tweaking them since then. The 2 changes, well, the one change that's happened is 2 of the levels of service results have now come in. They're from an external party. And so I'll be tweaking that front page because it's gone up from 80% to 82%. The quarterly report has the right numbers in it. So that's the only thing that's changed, I think. Oh, and we've picked up that the cash flow wasn't flowing rightly. So that's also going to be corrected. But otherwise, this document is what will go to audit. It has been sent to graphic design to be designed, and that's happening at the moment as well. The difference in the bottom lines really is you see that in our statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure. So this is against the annual plan. So instead of having, what was the numbers before? This one shows a surplus or a better off bottom line of 4.2 mil against budget, whereas our other one was, what was the other one? I can't remember now. Talked about it and then forgot. 2.2. So it's a little, a little bit of a difference. 2 mil for most people is a lot, but for us it's actually quite small. So I say it's little. Yeah, that's kind of, we can go through it if you want. Yeah, entirely up to you. In essence, it's the more formal document. The quarterly report pretty much explains all of that. The difference is it has a CE and a MEA's overview at the front that you don't get in your quarterly report. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as you've noted, this is draft report. There's a fair bit of work to do on it yet. It's subject to audit, which hasn't started yet. So, but if anybody has any questions or comments on what's presented, we cover those off. Otherwise, we'll receive it back after audit in September, I guess.
I think. So it will be a bit messy because audits come in October. Now, normally our normal deadlines would be you would have this back for adoption 31st of October because it's our legislated deadlines. But as you recall, last year, central government pushed those timelines out to be adoption 31st of December, recognising the resourcing issues within Audit New Zealand. So this year's, it's still the deadline is 31st of December. You'll also remember that last year Audit didn't meet those deadlines and we ended up adopting in February. I don't think it's going to be any different this year. Audit haven't said, but they haven't actually given us a timeline of when they'll adopt. And it'll be a whole, it'll be after elections. So some of you that'll be here and will be probably interested in it, and most of the others will be focusing on the future. So it's a bit disappointing that we do all the work, and actually at the end of the day, probably not a lot of people are going to look at it, but it's the process. So we're aiming to get it adopted by the 31st of December, but I almost feel like putting a mark on the board saying, I bet it's February.
Yeah, you're right there. It's 31st December is far too late. It's too late to be useful at all.
Yeah.
And the audit really should be underway now.
It should be. They should normally have been here.
Yeah. Councillor Short.
I do remember Clint commenting that when we were in lockdown, that they didn't get any overseas staff that they usually depend on. So hopefully now things are more open next year, we'll be in a better position.
The problem is that they get this accumulative because they're pushing out all these audits. By the time the next year they're still completing, it's almost like they're missing. Yeah, I can't see how they're going to catch up. I'm sure they've got some plans, but next year they're going to have the annual reports again, and then we start hitting LTPs, and they've got audits for LTPs as well. So once they've let that timeline slip, that's a massive work program to pull back. It's not our problem, but it is a nuisance.
I'm aware that Audit New Zealand have offloaded some of their non-council work and are focusing on government entities and councils. So some of the community-owned trusts and things that they work, they've allowed to be outsourced to commercial firms. So that's good. That may correct things. Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Amanda, just retracking steps a little bit, and I think it's probably now that you've given us that date for annual report too. You were talking about depreciation in the quarterly report, and given our conversation yesterday in our open meeting around the starting of the LTP come the new year, and how as a council we're probably going to do 2 because of central government's actions around Three Waters, etc. It's something I think the audit and risk team need to have a look at, because I think next year's one's going to be even messier as far as an annual and a quarterly report. But my real question is around stranded overheads. We've had that discussion earlier on. Do we know that figure that could be yet? How are you going to work with that, and how are you going to present it within your quarterlies and annual reports?
So that's a conversation we've been having probably over the last 12 months. The last time we looked at what the stranded overheads would potentially be was probably over 12 months ago, and it was particularly rough. We've had conversations around remodelling that, but we were waiting for the information to come out around what they're taking, what they're not taking, that kind of information, because we can spend a whole lot of time modelling stuff that's going to keep changing. So we're really waiting for, what's the dates? Is it October? There's some information coming out soon that'll give us some ideas of what they're thinking, like, are they taking stormwater, are they not, that kind of thing. That's all, that kind of stuff makes quite a lot of significance. Yeah. And I'm conscious that we've got so many other things underway. I don't want to do work that's actually going to be superseded in a month or two's time. Yeah. So yes, we will have stranded overheads, but I haven't spent any time looking at them again in the last 12 months.
Good. And then probably just a follow-on comment to that would be to Hamish, and the fact of how's work progressing with the change out of the ownership on land.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of progressing, it's really just working out what we can and can't do. There's some subdivision initiatives that are underway in terms of some of the solid waste activities. It's not an immediate kind of it'll happen or not. There's still quite a bit to work through on that. Yeah.
Yep. And again, that's probably through an audit and risk scenario as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Short.
I'm just thinking that while it was explained to most of us about the long-term plan in Three Waters, that John doesn't know, we might need updating on what it was about. So we've been instructed by government to pull Three Waters out of our long-term plan that we're starting to work on after Christmas. But the chief executive is recommending that we do it as a separate document.
So we'll wait to see on that one.
Yeah, so the general discussion is that we will do a long-term plan that has Three Waters in, and we'll do one that doesn't. Well, from a practicality point of view, we have a budget system that has a live system, a test system. We will vamp the test system up and run 2 parallel systems and run 2 budgets. It's going to be a beautiful work of art.
It will be. I'm sure.
Yeah, this one will be crystal ball gazing, and this one will hopefully not be. But
and if I can, Mr. Chair, and just to that too, and the fact that if just following on from Alison, if that has been an email to our CE from central government, I think that needs to be bloody shouted from the hill as well. And the fact of, and I'm sure communities for local democracy will be all over it, but to actually have that as a directive already from central government, to me, flies right in the face of what we're trying to do.
If I can expand on that, I don't believe that has been a directive. That's been a discussion around the table at some of the, I think, CE tables, but it hasn't actually been a directive. I think that's a couple of councils saying, this is how we're proposing to deal with it, is to run two. I don't think the stage has been a directive.
Okay, Councillor Ford.
Yeah.
Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just might maybe get an update from the Chief Executive on the separation of infrastructure assets from land. He updated me during the week, and I thought he had some recent legal advice that was, so I got the impression that things were fairly well advanced in a very positive way. So rather than take it from me, I think it's better to get it from our Chief Executive. But,
okay.
Sounds positive.
Okay, all good. Well, thanks. Right. Well,
just one follow-up.
Yeah.
Presumably central government aren't paying for that work to be done.
Paying for, sorry?
The two.
Oh gosh, no. Okay. Oh, well, yeah, you know, there, we have received Three Waters funding. You know, they've got all these titles. I want to say it's transition funding. I'm not quite sure now. It's about 350,000. We've got the first tranche of that, which is about 96,000. We've invoiced, received that, and that is to help us resource all the data requests that they're asking for. Maybe if it's still there at the time that doing an LTP, we might be able to bid in some of, you know, assign some of that cost. But they have, you know, I suppose they've kind of been a little bit generous in that space, recognise that we need help on it. What would be more useful is if they had a pool of people trained and able to work in local government, understand council finances, rather than just give us some cash and go, can you resource it? Because yeah, we're expecting a data extract for Three Waters like any day now, and technically it's to backfill the team to be able to do that. But if I could find an accountant off the street that could just pop in and backfill, that would, you know, that's utopia, really. Yeah.
It would also be a miracle, and it would mean that people would do their audits on time.
Yeah,
if these accountants were all available.
Yeah, floating around.
Good luck with it.
Yeah, so they're chucking some cash at it, but it's not cash that actually helps, it's the experience. So I don't have anything else on the annual report.
No, we did digress a bit there, but yeah, so back to the audit report, the annual report. Yeah, any further items in relation to that? If not, we've got a resolution then, have we? No. Is there
Just to receive it, I think.
Yeah, so we're just receiving it. There's no resolution required.
I think,
is that correct?
It's a
Page 4.
It's normally receive it and release it for audit, I think it is.
Okay, well, perhaps we will have a resolution to receive the annual report for the year ended 30th of June. Councillor Short, did you want to move that?
That the Audit and Risk Committee recommends that the council receive the draft annual report for the year ended 30 June 2022, and that the Mayor and Chief Executive be delegated authority to make changes that result from the two external valuations, that the Mayor and Chief Executive be delegated authority to make any minor changes requested by Audit New Zealand, and to sign the statement of compliance and responsibility that is contained within the annual report for the year ending 30 June 2022.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Casey, thank you. We'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Yep, carried. Thank you. Now, I'm mindful there's another, it's 6 minutes to 10. There's another meeting happening in the Manawatu room, if anybody wants a cup of tea prior to that. But we've got a few items left to get through. Otherwise, we'll have to go up the staff room, I guess, to grab a cuppa afterwards.
So we could take a break now for 10 minutes, or we could continue.
What would members like to do? Carry on or grab a coffee?
Grab a coffee.
Okay, we'll take a break for, well, it'll be 5 minutes because we'll have to get out of the room. So we may bring a coffee back in here. Thank you.
I came down the road and saw you down by the satellite and thought, should I have wisdom and say like that? You know, so you deep in discussion on your constituents and decided
Right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for that. Right, we'll carry on with item 7.4, the internal FBT audit on page 222.
Right. So part of our internal audit program is an external audit of FBT and GST. So really, when we're saying internal audit, we're saying the audit was initiated internally, but it's not actually done internally. For this, you'll recall we went out and asked the two main players, PwC and Deloitte's, and we chose Deloitte's. Predominantly, they were almost half the price of PwC, made it a no-brainer. But also, they had the ability, I mean, PwC may have had the ability as well, but their audits for Deloitte's, they go to a level that's been approved by IRD. So if IRD were to randomly select us, they would pick up this report and go, thank you very much, kind of thing. So there's benefit in doing a slightly more in-depth audit, which is what we've done. They were great to work with, actually. It was quite really good. Behind me, I have Debbie and Kat, so the two accountants. Debbie really led this GST FBT audit, so any technical questions Debbie will be answering, because I don't really know, and Kat supported her. So, yeah.
Come up, table.
Questions. Absolutely. Yeah, I sent them a list to ask you.
Dominated all, don't worry.
Do I do refer to Hamish?
Yeah.
And we'll be away.
I can do that.
So the process, we contracted them, usual thing, and the process which is written on inside them is they sent out a questionnaire. So we did the questionnaire internally, which really consisted of me read it, think, oh my God, and send it to Debbie. So there were quite a few questions around how we do things. What do we have in the organisation? How do we do stuff? Being Deloitte, they know about local governments. So they had some very targeted questions around brands levies and vehicles and stuff. So it was good that we were, one of the bonuses of using one of the big ones that actually deal with local and central government. Then they did workshops where they kind of interviewed and grilled and found answers and that kind of thing. Documents, yeah, and there was a lot of documentation provided, and then they did the final report. So that's the process. The findings, I must say, I'm quite happy with. I think it's a really good news story. Predominantly, we've got a little bit of tweaking to do, which we've undertaken, but the main thing with their findings is that they pretty much recognise that we're doing it right, but it's all in Debbie's head as to why and how. So we have,
Some of it is on paper.
Some of it's on paper, but predominantly the knowledge sits within our team rather than why we do it, we're doing it this way. So we really need to do some documentation, which is great. We're going to embark on doing that. We had a little bit of a tweak around the declaration forms for motor vehicles, which has already been done. And a little bit of a tweaking around how we're dealing with some of our employee health benefits and that kind of thing. So still providing them, but in gift cards, reimbursement, different methods for different things. So it's not stopping the way that we work, it's just doing it in a more compliant manner.
Okay.
Were there any specific questions? Councillor Hadfield was quite excited that he now knows quite a lot about FBT, which was fabulous. You got any specific questions around?
I think it's fair to say I thought I knew a bit about FBT, but I thought it was actually quite convoluted, actually. But
it is.
I think it could be simpler. Is I think the point I was making to Amanda. But anyhow, clearly Amanda's an accountant. I'm not. So that answers it.
It's not a simple tax, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's for real.
That's true.
Yeah, I think that the point I was making, Mr. Chair, is I didn't realise it's actually as complex as it was.
Yeah.
And I think it could be an awful lot simpler.
Debbie's just reminded me that the rules around FBT and actually GST are under review. There are some changes coming out around the GST rules, and I'd expect something around the FBT as well, because it is pretty convoluted, some of them. Yeah. You know, that's the reason why we have tax specialists. When you have a specialist for tax, you know it's convoluted.
Yep,
Mr. Chair,
councillor
probably
Casey.
Slightly, thank you. Naive question. Do you think those changes may simplify things or, forgive me, it is, I did say it was a naive question. No, the shake of the head says no, very good.
You'd
Yep.
expect, you'd hope that they have. You'd hope that they're listening to the sector and coming back, but it depends what it is that they're focusing on. In the GSTs, I had a look and thought the changes for us are kind of teeny. The GST stuff, they've actually come out and told us what the changes are. They're really minor. So I don't really think I hate to think how much money they've probably spent on doing the changes and actually the impact for us is overall. So.
Okay.
Process me.
Yeah, John.
Sorry, having geeked out quite a lot on tax through the years, but mainly been caught in international stuff lately. I think it's a very good report actually, because yeah, the FBT can be pretty complex when you get into it because people have played around with it so much. Just one question though, when people use a work vehicle for private purposes and they maybe put petrol or something in it, is there still a possibility of getting a reduction for that or credit for that? I think there used to be at one stage.
Yeah.
Yes, you can still claim personal spend on a work vehicle for work purposes.
Right. And do we actually take account of that in our form? We do. Okay, cool. Thanks.
We have very little private use.
Yeah.
We've got the exec vehicles, which is contracted by their own contract, but then we have the fleet vehicle, which have e-roads in them, and we run reports that say where are they at a certain time, and very, very limited private use.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so there's a number of recommendations that they've made. So you've taken those on board and planning to action all of
We
them?
have, I think we've got them noted as each one. There's a little table that tells us about what we're doing within the report for each of those steps.
Yeah. Well,
So undertaking the FBT manual, we've updated the declaration form. We've done some work around how we're dealing with the health benefits work. So I think we've got them all noted within the cover report from memory. Yeah, so underway. The documentation is the most outstanding thing we've got to do, the manual of how and why we do it. Mostly because we're actually focusing on the annual plan and stuff right now and training a couple of new team members. But that is starting.
There is a draft document underway.
okay. Well, it appears we're happy to receive the report. Any other
Happy to
questions?
move, Mr.
Yes,
Chair, if
please.
you wish. Happy to move that the Audit and Risk Committee receives the Deloitte FBT review on the Manawatu District Council dated August 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Hadfield. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Marsh, we'll take Councillor Marsh, if that's okay. Just jumping up and down there. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Right, thank you very much. Next item is the report on the internal audit findings of GST review.
Us again. Hi, I'm Amanda and this is Debbie. Hamish is having a little sulk in the corner there. So again, we used Deloitte's. We actually did this as a package. We said to them, can you do us a price for both? But when we started doing the work, we realised mostly due to resourcing, you really can't do two audits at the same time. So they did the GST first and then they did the FBT. Again, this is a really good audit. It talks about that we are doing it pretty much right. We just haven't got the documentation down as to why we're doing it and how we're doing it. So again, that's a download of Debbie's mind into paper format that we can understand. The understanding bit. They've got some recommendations. There is nothing red, so this is a really good thing. They're all kind of recommendations or nice to haves. You know, when you're getting comments around that we just need to do flow diagrams to help staff work their way through, there's nothing kind of see here. So that's I'm finding that really, really positive. If anyone's got any questions on that, it's very similar to the FBT.
So
do you know as much about GST, Mr. Head? Does he read the FBT one? So or did you get the FBT one? I think.
Thank you, Amanda. I think it's probably prudent that I don't share my experiences on this format.
Yeah,
So there was no items in red, are all in green and yellow, orange, whatever you call it.
yeah,
So no items of particular concern.
no.
See, any comments from anybody? Otherwise, we'll simply receive the report.
Happy to move that.
Thank you,
That's the case.
Councillor Casey.
The Audit and Risk Committee receives a delightful GST review on the Manawatu District Council dated April 2022.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
Second.
John. Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, you can be excused, Amanda. Thank you. Right, moving on then. Item 8. Update and internal audit. Kathy.
Yes, thank you. So Amanda has done a fantastic job of completing the 21-22 audit work programme. Unfortunately, because Audit New Zealand aren't on site till the 1st of October, we won't get our management report, which helps inform our next work programme. And so there will be some work obviously being pulled together. And once we get that draft report, we'll be able to inform the next year's audit programme. And that will come to the new Risk and Audit Committee of the new triennium.
Yep. Okay, so there's nothing on the go at the moment or nothing planned at this point?
No, not at the moment.
Um,
No, that's all right.
There is the IT systems audit that happens every year.
Yeah.
So that's always on there. That just happens. They do various audits during the year, such as happen, the system kind of thing. That's on their schedule. That happens no matter what.
Okay. So there's nothing on the scale of the GST and the FBT ones we've just done. No. That's fine. Is the committee happy with that approach? We just leave the program until we receive the external audit report. Yeah, so there's no items that anybody has a particular concern about, including the staffing team that they'd like reviewed in the meantime. No, we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thanks for that update. Number 9, update the external audit plan. Amanda, now you've got the
You've got the document.
program.
Yeah, Councillor Stewart reminded us that this hadn't actually been through you. We signed it, but it hasn't actually been to you, so actually know what it is that they're going to audit. So from our view, this is a really useful document from a financial view because it tells us what they're focusing on. So it's the direction of the Office of the Auditor General to their team. This is where I think you need to be looking. And there are different things every year. A couple of the items on here around revaluation of infrastructure assets, we're nailing that with our external review. So you can kind of, I feel that will be let's not look here too much because we're doing external. A standing item from previously was the fair value assessment of assets. So are we doing our fair value assessment? And in previous years, I actually forgot. We didn't do it last year and we got it over the line last minute. We did the fair value and that's why we've triggered the reval. So I'm fairly happy that this year the auditors are going to be pretty okay with that. Impairments of assets, that's also going to be covered by our revals because we're looking closely at our assets and looking at the state of them. So pretty comfortable with that. The risk of management overrides of internal controls. This is a standing item. There's always a risk that someone could do something that they shouldn't be doing. Yeah, it's a standing item. I'm not aware of any process changes that we've done that now would leave us open. So they check us every year. I'm not aware of any processes that we've changed that would leave us open, but they will do that audit anyway. Capital projects, they always talk about this. You know, how much is in our work in progress? Is it really capital expenditure, that kind of thing? Year before last, we really hammered our work in progress. I did go through, when we went into lockdown, one of the really exciting things I did is virtually scroll through transaction by transaction and say, is that actually capital and is it in the right place? Which got our balances right down. And last year we had a really good audit response, and this is that they were happy with our work in progress and levels of balances in there. The one thing, so that's that one. Central government funding, you know, state the obvious. They're expecting some reporting around any money that we've got. The one that is applicable on that list, so the $3.8 billion Housing Accelerated Fund, we haven't got any funding from that. The 2.5 better off funding, well, we're in the process of applying for that. There's nothing to see as at 30th of June, so that's easy. The shovel ready funding, we didn't get anything in that, but the $7.6 million funding package provided for improving Three Waters, I'm not sure if that it may be the funds that for the transition where they're giving us 350,000 to help resource, but again, that didn't happen until July. So I'm kind of feeling like that's a nothing to see because we haven't got that funding to worry about as at 30th of June. Drinking water performance measures, Hamish showed. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be great. Impact of Three Waters, they're pretty much saying Three Waters is coming, we don't know what it is, we're going to think about it. And what we often find here is they will give us, by the time the audit gets to the end, they would have had a couple of audits that have gone all the way through the process, all the way up to their peer review, and those peer review big wigs and audit would have come back and said, oh, I think you need to have a declaration around this. And our auditors will come back and go, you need to plug this into your accounts. And we'll go, okay, we'll stick it in. Bonus of not being first is that they will then come back and tell you what it is you need to put in there. Impact of COVID-19. Now, this is a standard thing that we've been doing the last couple of years. There's a note in our accounts that talks about that our services were restricted by our levels, our people accessing the pool and library were restricted, and we talk about that in there. So the biggest one that is my concern is the configuration and customization for software services. So this is recognizing that in the past, when you purchased a piece of software, you bought a floppy disk or you bought a disk or you bought a system and you owned it and you put it on your server. But nowadays we're going to cloud. So what are you actually buying? And there's been some guidelines recently. If you ever want to go to sleep, feel free to read the guidelines, but there's some guidelines recently about how we should be dealing with this. Predominantly, it looks like we need to be expensing these things. And so there's three options. One is that you can capitalize them. Most likely you can only capitalize things that you actually have some sort of control. So you could sell it off, you have control of it. When you purchase a cloud-based system, you really don't have control of it. So predominantly it's expensed. There is some ability to capitalize customizations. So you'll generally buy something off the shelf and you have to customize it. There's the ability to customize, then potentially you could do that. It's quite a complex area. And so during the last financial year, we upgraded our GIS system, so funky mapping kind of system that we use, and our Java system, which is our document management system. Both of them went to cloud. Total spend of about 400K. I made the call just to expense those through the accounts at year end and put them through the expense. Mostly because we're going to spend a lot of time trying to prove that they're not, and actually they're quite basic cloud-based systems with very limited customization. So I just expense them. My concern is on next year's budget and going forward, we've got the ERP replacement. So our full accounting suite, we're talking about a $1.3 million project. Currently budgeted as CapEx. So we need to work out very smartly if that's actually a CapEx project. And you might say, well, you just put it into OpEx, but remember OpEx is funded by rates. So we need to be thinking the difference for us is if it's CapEx, it's either renewal funded, which it would be, or debt if it was new. If we stick it into OpEx, boom, this is a rates impact. So I'm just working our way through that. I suspect that a large chunk of that's going to go into OpEx, but I feel that we've got a very good slant to say that it's still renewals funded because we've rated for the depreciation of an existing asset to be able to renew it. So I kind of feel, this is my gut at the moment, is that we will probably put predominantly in the annual claim process, put it into OpEx and fund it via the renewal reserve, be one of those technicalities. But we're just working through that.
So question for me, you've got two parts to the software, I understand. One is the license fees. The bulk of software now is paid for by subscription rather than purchasing it. You know, you used to buy a box and a couple of discs, like you said, but now you just pay a subscription and the software provider just automatically upgrades it as they go.
That's the expense. Yeah.
Yeah. But the one you mentioned about, for example, the ERP project, I understand, will be employing consultants or whatever to personalize or write a package of software for just our use. And there's quite a big upfront capital spend to do that, which would be and that project would be expected to last, what, a number of years?
Yeah, so predominantly, I think, off the top of my head, our software is expensed, I think it's 7 years, but it might be 5, can't remember now. It's not expense, it's depreciated. So generally, when you put in an ERP, the first year of licensing, you capitalize that with the cost of the implementation and that, and then after that it's expensed. So your initial licenses and all of that are capitalized. But now with the change of rules, I'm not even sure that the implementation costs are actually capitalized, because at the end of it, what have you got? We've actually only got a license to use something. So that's where my problem is at the moment. So Audit New Zealand through here, they kind of say, we suggest you might want to get external advice on that. Well, that's pretty helpful. So I reached out to Deloitte again because they've done a really good article in 2021 around this. So I thought actually they are really across this, and I reached out to them, but I'm not that comfortable with the $30,000 to $40,000 price tag that they're quoting to do this work. So just recently, Audit New Zealand have also come out with some updated guidelines. So I'm just going to kind of sit down with a clear head and start going back through it and seeing what we can do without having to get external advice. But so it's just something floating out there in the sphere, is that this needs to be done pretty quickly in the next few months. But as at 30th of June, we did expense the GIS and the Jarvis software, which is about 400K, flushed through our bottom line, so we don't kind of have to worry about it.
John?
Yep, may I just ask I understand the materiality of say 400, but yeah, when you get into your ERP, it's bigger. So when you're customizing now, the rule is likely to change. It seems from the day when you could say, yes, we've just made this piece of software to work with the ERP, we'll amortize it over time. If you've got lumpy license fees, is it possible then that we would be allowed to spread them evenly over the period of time of the license?
I mean, it comes down to your contract with your supplier. I think that's what we mean, obviously. What Datacom have done, so I don't want to say who we're going to, but Datacom is the latest provider and they're the same people that we use now. So I've reached out to them to say, could you give us a copy of what the contract would be? Because I discussed it with them and said, this is our problem. They said, absolutely, it's across the sector. They actually are discussing internally themselves and stuff. So they've given us a copy of the contract so we can actually work through and say, this is what we would be, because a lot of it comes down to the contractual side of what it is that they're saying. So we've been given a copy of that. We're going to just work our way through. We can do some smart budgeting potentially. You think about some of our other, I think it's a district plan, we know it's going to be this much over 10 years. So we rate a smoother mountain and we go into deficit and we come up, and we may have to do that for some of these large projects. We may have to think about the way that we're funding them going forward.
Sure.
And flatline the rates and actually spend like this. It's something we have to work through.
And generally Datacom are pretty reliable in this area. So I guess what we do might somewhat reflect what they're doing in terms of their income apportionment over time.
Yeah.
But they may not want to tell us that.
No, they're an interesting company. I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 big players in the thing. And Magic Software is another one. We use the budget reporting tool, but we don't use the ERP. They're also another big player in there. Civica and Finance One or Tech One. They're kind of the 4 players. Horizons have just gone to the Datascape, so we'll be watching that space.
To see how they go.
See how they go, but they don't use anywhere near as much of a system as we do. They don't have the regulatory. They're quite a cut down version. I reached out to my colleagues over there and said, hey guys, what are you doing in this space around treatment of, and their response was, oh, we have to capitalize it, can't afford to do anything else. So, good luck getting that past audit.
Fun.
Good luck with it. So yeah, it's a bit of work. It's a bit of work. And then the last one is the adoption of PBE for S48. This was not on my register till yesterday. So I've gone back to Audit New Zealand and said, hey, what's this template you've said you'd provided? Oh, yes. No, we haven't sent that to you yet. So they're flicking it through. We'll work through that with them. Yes. It's just another accounting standard change that we'll just work through. So,
sorry, yes, Chair, sorry, Amanda, there's a bit of jargon going through there. I don't want to hold anyone up, but thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
International financial reporting standards.
Right.
So there's financial reporting standards across, I suppose you say, the world, but they're based on, so if you're a little charity, you have these kind of range of standards.
Understood.
With us, because we're a big one, we get more.
Thank you.
Yeah. And actually, if you ever want to, there's a really good website. You can actually go there,
Yes,
really
and read them all.
tier 1 to 4. And so, yeah, I think it goes 4. I think we're 1, highest expensive down to cheapest. Yeah. And then it lists the ones that are relevant for the entity.
Nice.
Yeah.
Likelihood of my looking at the website is fairly low.
I'll send it out to you. Send it out to you.
Thank
Might
you.
be
I
useful.
appreciate that. I
Yeah.
really-
Yeah.
Might be useful once you're not having all these meetings.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
The point about the point made in the report was that there's a change to the reporting standards. We're required to put another page in the annual report, called a statement of service performance, which details
More stuff.
what our outcomes and outputs have been during the year.
Understood. Thank you.
Which is what's in there anyway, but it's
Yeah.
just another page to go into the financial statements.
So Audit New Zealand have done what we call they mock up, an ideal for a council. It's on their website. So we just have to go through and see what is actually different.
So it doesn't apply for this year's financial statements, which we just looked at, but it will apply in the next year's ones, the 2023. So what they're saying is we just need to get ready to have that statement ready to go.
I appreciate everyone unpacking that. Thank you.
So one of the key things to note in this audit plan is on page, it talks about the timeline, loving it, page 22. So interim began on the 4th of July, they were here. Draft financials are available for them, they are. Audit begins on the 3rd of October, cool, and everything else is to be agreed. So whenever it gets done, it gets done. Normally, these are dates, they're firm and that, but I'm not, part of it's their resourcing, but I'm not pushing too hard because we actually need our external auditor to come back with infrastructure reval, and it could easily be us holding them up. So I'm just playing the nicely. It'll happen when it happens because it's a kind of a two-way impact this year. We've got total value information, but we haven't yet finished the infrastructure. So yeah, there's peaks and flows.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Amanda. Any questions on the external audit process and that report? That's what they're planning to do. We just need to receive that. It's been agreed to by council. So that is the proposed program, and we'll look forward to it happening. All right, okay, we'll leave it at that. We just need to receive that report for information. Right, item 10, update from Governance, Health and Safety Rep. Anything that you wanted to comment on, Phil?
Just to that, not really. My comments earlier on in the meeting pretty much summed it up. It was a good time to bid Brooke farewell and all that he has done within this space. It's been fantastic. And I certainly think just going forward too, as this is the last audit and risk meeting for the triennium, it's been a great experience for me to be a part of the governance team looking after the health and safety side of things. And I think my comments earlier around the awareness that it is now brought forward for us all around the table has been fantastic, and also congratulate and acknowledge Francis's work within that space as well. And revert back to the presentation that we received in Auckland at national level for that. So just a congratulations really to everybody, and the openness and awareness that we now have around our whole workspace and the environment that we're in every day, and our employees, well, not our employees, Shane's employees are in every day. So that would be the comment I'd make there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Phil? Nope. Thank you, Phil. And thank you for your work. Right, item 11, late items, there are none. Item 12, notification of items for the risk register. Has there been anything from today's meeting that would require an addition or amendment to the risk register that anyone's thought of as we've gone through the meeting? I haven't really made a note of anything other than the Three Waters effect, which is probably already on there anyway, I'm guessing. Nope, all good. Item 13, notification of items for next meeting. Has anybody got any particular items for the next meeting, which will be in November, is it? Sometime.
February,
Oh, no, where are we up
No, we
to?
just do a quarterly November. You'll have a quarterly report, but that's normal.
Oh, whenever the
See
next
if
one
there's
is.
anything
No, nothing anybody wants to raise now. That's all good. We'll leave it till then. Okay, public excluded business. So we have a resolution to move to public excluded. So I'll move then that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of the meeting, namely confirmation of minutes.
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Phil. Put that motion, all those in favour? Against, carried, thank you.